so people can see it. Okay, so what I want to talk about tonight is I want to sort of think about Fornost in the context of the story that LOTRO has built in the North Downs, and I think the North Downs is. I've been spending a lot of time in the North Downs lately. And I've been Trish teases me because I'm such a terrible completionist. Like I just did like everything in the North Downs, like every quest and every deed and everything. So anyway, I've been thinking a lot about the North Downs, and I think it's actually a really interesting kind of case study for the way that LOTRO does stuff, and I think it's a really interesting glimpse at their story. So you think about the role of the North Downs in Tolkien's works, right? That phrase is used. It's a name that they've taken from the books. It's in Appendix A, describing the Wars of the North Kingdoms. We talked a little bit about the history of the North Kingdoms last time. It was the main place. It was the main center of power of Arthedain, the sort of last surviving Dunedain kingdom of the North, and the cool thing about the North Downs story is that on the one hand, you don't have very much, of course you have very, very little direct evidence about what's going on in the North Downs at the time of the Lord of the Rings. So as far as like actual contemporary story from the book, there's very, very little to go on. But there's not nothing to go on, right? And they've clearly started with what we're given in the book. And what we're given in the books in the Lord of the Rings about the North Downs and what's happening in the North Downs, we can basically draw from a couple like short references. One is the stuff that Butterbur says about the land up to the north of Bree, and that's like most of it contained in a single sentence, or two sentences, I guess. When he's speaking with Gandalf and the hobbits at the end, and Gandalf mentions Norbury of the Kings, the king is going to be settling back up in the north again, and Butterbur says, up away by Dead Man's Dyke, that's haunted land, that is. And that phrase by Butterbur, like the first time I went into the Fornost region in LOTRO, like I just kept hearing, like, and I'm going through like the blasted land with all of the ghosts and Barghests and everything around. Like just Butterbur's phrase just kept repeating itself again and again to my mind. But that's haunted land, that is. That's haunted land, that is. And so it's clear that's sort of the nugget of the way that they've done, especially the Fornost region. Is inspired by the way that the people in Bree talked about it. There's that sort of kernel of it there. The other thing that we learn about the contemporary North Downs, again contemporary as opposed to historical North Downs, is the references that Aragorn gives, especially in the Council of Elrond, about the activity of the Dunedain, and especially again when he's talking about Bree and referring back to Butterbur, and saying that that Bree and Butterbur live a day's march away from foes that would freeze his heart, and would lay his small land in ruins if he were not guarded ceaselessly. And thinking about that from a world building standpoint, and sort of trying to conceive and flesh out the world of Eriador here as they're doing in LOTRO, that's a really tantalizing statement to kind of live up to when you think about it, right? So there are some monstrous creatures, there are some really dangerous things that live very, very close to Bree, according to Aragorn, and and on the one hand, the Rangers are very active in protecting the southern lands from the incursions of these dangerous things, apparently coming from the north, and yet but at the same time, we know that the Rangers are not very many, and we know it's not like they're protecting, Bree and the southern lands with armies and military formations and things. So what kind of enemies would it be? How would they defend them? And how is it that a small group of Rangers would be able to accomplish that? And so so when you see the way that LOTRO goes about building the North Downs, it's really interesting to see how they've taken up those the kinds of challenges that are involved in really fleshing out what that actually looks like in practice. So a couple things that seem to me what really brilliant ways to kind of make that a reality are first, of course, Esteldean, the hiding place of the Dunedain, which strikes me as I really like that from the first time I saw it. I think it's a really brilliant concept of what a sort of central gathering place of the, sort of central stronghold of the Dunedain would be like up in the North Downs. The North Downs would be geographically the place where we would expect to find them based on everything that Aragorn says in the books. And the fact that they would hide up in an old ruin, that it would be a hidden stronghold, more of a guerrilla outpost than a military installment, that it would be in one of the ruins of old Arnor. That all makes really great sense. In particular, the way that it's located at a pass in the mountains connecting the two regions, that seems like it seems very, very well thought out as a ranger outpost. The second thing is Trestlebridge, of course. And that, I think, is particularly brilliant, Trestlebridge, because, of course, by creating that huge ravine that's spanned by the one bridge to get between Bree and the north, they've created this geographic bottleneck, which makes it possible for the southern lands from Bree on south, Bree and the Shire, to be sheltered in the way, that's the phrase, it's the word that Tolkien uses to describe those lands. They know that the Shire had been sheltered by the Dunedain. How can it's one very sensible and logical way in which a small group of dedicated people could in fact keep enemies, could shelter an entire region if there's that kind of geographical bottleneck. And so I loved the fact when I first went up to the North Downs and did the Trestlebridge quests and the joining Halbered to come down and help to fight off the orcs that are coming into Trestlebridge. I really, really liked that. Because again, it just, to me, it makes a great deal of sense. And again, it's one of the things that really impressed me early on about the way that they're handling the books, because you can see that the storyline and the whole conception of that region is really built around this sort of the few things that we're told about the situation, the situation there in the north in The Lord of the Rings. A couple of people wanted to say some things. Aaron, we'll start with you.
Yes. If I'm not sure, back when Gondor and Arnor were in their full bloom, I'm not sure what the main route would have been between the two, but if the so-called King's Road that goes north and south through the Bree land would have been the main route, which would have gone through Trestlebridge. The one detail that I've noticed to be missing, the Greenway, as Manillidan says, the one detail that I've noticed to me to be missing from LOTRO would be the ruins of any great bridge that might have fallen and would have been replaced by the small wooden bridge that now exists in Trestlebridge. Because if there was a lot of traffic going north and south between Arnor and Gondor, then I'd think they'd need something more than just this little bridge,
Yes. Now, of course, there's one potential argument in favor of a wooden bridge that is not only to say a current wooden bridge, but a historical wooden bridge, and that is for defensive purposes. Ask Turin how big enduring stone bridges work out in defensive positions. He might have something to say with chagrin in retrospect about that. But so, I mean, it's though in general I do agree with you. With so many places in the north, in Evendim and the North Downs and in Angmar, and even in the Bree lands, of course, we see so many of the these ancient ruins of Arnor that survive. I agree with you that it does seem a little bit odd that we don't get. I'm thinking of, like, for instance, of that great bridge in the very south of Evendim, right down just north and east of Anuminus, in LOTRO. that's like,
yeah.
something like in that genre. I agree. I would kind of have expected to see at Trestle Bridge too. But again, I almost like it because you can kind of I mean, I have no idea if this was their intention in LOTRO, but I could easily imagine it's. If it's an oversight by them, it seems to me a sort of a lucky one that at least sort of potentially fits the sort of military situation, because of course the whole point of that is you would want a choke point. You would want to be able to, if you were driven back from the south to Fornost, which was one of their strong points, you'd want to be able to cast down the bridge behind you relatively easily. Again, I have no idea if that's what they were thinking, but it works anyway. But you're right. I too am a little bit surprised that we don't get more in the way of ruins there.
One might argue that then the route up through the Shire and Oatbarton and going right up to Illuminus would have been the main route, but I can't imagine that they would do that because the Shire has always been kind of just by itself, even when they were under the rule of the king, as they say. So I don't know. Yeah. It's just a little detail. That's all.
Yeah, it is. It does. I mean, yeah. The sense of it was that the Shire was always much more secluded. Though at the same time, the time of the settling of the Shire is already relatively. I mean, Arnor is still standing, of course, but it's not like the hobbits were already in the Shire when Arnor was being established, of course. So I have to admit, that is one of the things I was a little surprised. And I guess we should probably save this for when we do Illuminus. But I was a little bit surprised geographically by the relationship between Illuminus and the Shire in that way. But as I said, we'll come back to that later on. Let's see. Air to Gruel, you had something you wanted to add? See, Air to Gruel had a hand up. No. Okay. Well, I don't want to. Oh, okay. Okay. Ziegel tour in game. Okay. All right.
How to use it, maybe.
All right. Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to repeat for those who are new, I'm going through and unmuting people who have arrived recently. Again, just remember if your mics are connected, your mic will be live when I unmute you. So go ahead and... Oh, and Sarah, was that you? No? I thought I saw Ellen Serial.
Yeah, I thought I saw something too. She had to log off and log on again because she was having microphone problems.
Yeah, I know she's been having. I was hoping that was finally the ne'er heard voice of Ellen Sariel here in our session. Well, I don't want to. I mean, I could talk about this stuff still for a while. I'll make one last point, and then and then of course, take any questions or comments you guys wanted to make. The other thing that I wanted to say, the other thing that I find really interesting about the way they've constructed the North Downs is the way that they have kind of taken, not just have they sort of followed up the kind of hints about the sort of geopolitical situation in the North Downs in the books, but also the way in which they have imported a bunch of themes. Like many of the stories that they have imported into the North Downs are ones which are really plainly based upon, sort of drawn from themes and storylines that that are very familiar in other parts of Tolkien's world. The most obvious, of course, being the Oathbreakers, that whom they've sort of imported from South Gondor. I can't help but wonder, actually. Trish, you have to remind me. This would be a good question to ask Chris at Mythmoot this weekend. But I would kind of wonder if they would have done the quests with the Oathbreakers the way that they did if they had been fully planning at the time to do South Gondor eventually, as they have done since.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering if there was some chagrin that they kind of like, had already done the Oathbreaker so much.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to.
There's actually a session play in the Epic where you flash back to the original Oathbreaking, and you're playing one of the companions of the people there, and you actually witness
awesome.
The Oathbreaking.
Ooh.
So that's in there, but it's in there as
awesome.
a flashback. So that's kind of
Oh, like when they discovered the Balrog kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember when I saw that one, I was thinking I was wanting an Oathbreaker session play. It wasn't exactly what I would have had in a perfect world, but I certainly liked it.
It was close
That's
to
very
my. It's yeah.
The only reason it wasn't perfect is I don't like session plays where you don't really do anything.
Oh, where you just stand and watch is basically what you did in that one.
Pretty much. That's the
Yeah.
only thing I didn't like about that one.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, anyway, say there's like the Oathbreakers. There's of course the story of Amarthael that is at the root of Fornost. The way that the sort of that central story of how Amarthael comes in as the bringer of gifts. In it with a very Anatar and Eregian kind of theme. Just like Sauron and Celebrimbor. The idea of Fornost being lost by betrayal is, I think, seems to me a really interesting and a very apt kind of choice for Fornost. The idea that treachery underlies it. I love the storylines that they're introducing into the North Downs. The way that they use the North Downs as the frontier from Angmar, and your first real introduction. As you go through the game, especially you start further south in Ered Luin or Bree or the Shire, and you see rumors of, you see a few examples of the Angmarim coming down, and you hear rumors from the north. But then in the North Downs, you're really seeing the invasion from the north coming down, in the orcs that are attacking the farms, and the hillmen that are coming in, of course, with all the memories of old Rudar in the north and east before. And even the Earthkin, who are weird, still, like, again, the idea of the corruption of the north coming in. It's the one element that I really like of the Earthkin story. Not only of alien invaders coming in, but this sort of corruptive force from the north that is sort of seducing over to its side even others who have been loyal in the past. Anyway, I think I think that's there's definitely a lot more detail that we could get into there, but to me the North Downs are just a fascinating glimpse at the way that LOTRO has sort of built their world and built their story, using being so careful as they so always are, to be really building this carefully from both direct and indirect elements of Tolkien's story.